I'm Mike,
And I'm Candis.
and this is our story.
I grew up in Tampa. I live with my mom and my sister, and we grew up in a broken home. Really more of a high stress environment, and we had attended church here and there, but we really had no godly values in our household. I come from a long line of people who shout and yell about their feelings instead of really deal with them. And because of that, I liked fast-paced, chaotic things, and I really found myself attracted to more of a bad boy, adventurous kind of situation. So my first two kids were made out of an abusive and really toxic relationship. Oftentimes we were homeless, or we would move or be displaced because the money that we made was not spent on bills and rent, but spent on drugs and alcohol. It was really just a toxic lifestyle. And I had kind of found myself in a place where the abuse had gotten too much, and it really had started to affect me in a way that I was just as toxic as the person that was abusing me. I was looking for something different when my son challenged me in a way that I can't quite remember what we were talking about, but we were driving the car, and from the back seat he said that he didn't know God, that God didn't live at our house. And I taught him about God at Easter and Christmas. We talked about it, so I just kind of thought, he knew who Jesus was, and it really bothered me when he said that God didn't live at our house. I remember thinking about that, and I had a friend that had been inviting us for weeks to come to church, and we did. And without a doubt, I was where I was meant to be that day. That first day, God really started working on my life, and I gave my life over to the Lord, and He started radically changing our lives from there.
Born and raised in South Tampa, and pretty much went to church my entire life. From an early age, I was an altar boy, really doing everything that you're supposed to do within church, never really developing that relationship with God the way I'd seen. My family wasn't necessarily broken, even though my dad was in and out of my life until the time I was 20. And then my parents finally got divorced at that point. But still, I never had of the full relationship. I had all the knowledge, went to Christian school for 8 years of my life, and never really had that full relationship that you're supposed to with God. Never consulting God on any of the decisions I made, whether it was college, marriage, whatever. I'd gone with a blues band in 1990 for a couple of months, came back, thought I was back into church, and met my wife, my first wife at that point. Got married in 93, and never really consulted God on that. And I'd always thought that, I'm supposed to be in ministry, and I even revealed that to her within the first year of marriage. And she's like, there's never enough money in ministry. And so, I just didn't consult God on any of the decisions I had been making in my life, and struggled through 15 years of marriage, and finally got divorced. And I was done with God at that point. In 2010, I said, I've written you off, God. You're not a part of my life. The decisions I've made have been bad, but obviously it's been your fault.
So I was attending church regularly, and I was really just surrendering and accepting every challenge that came from the pulpit, to not to be late, to attend consistently, to serve, and then to fast. And I did my first fast, and I gave up. I fasted traditionally, but then I gave up some worldly things that I hadn't let go of, smoking and places I was going to hang out. And then I had started serving and attending outreach. I was just hungry for a different way of life for me and my kids. And every challenge that I took on did not disappoint. We would grow, and then I was invited to attend a Bible college meeting, and I loved it.
So I finally got divorced in 2010, and I had been running from God previous to that. And that year in 2010, my mom had asked, the only Christmas present she wanted was for me to go back to church. I said, no. Well, finally, after many convincings, I went ahead and went back to church, and it wasn't long before I was on a regular basis back in church and really growing in that love for God again and wanting to serve Him more and more. And within about the first year or so, I decided to go ahead and go into Bible college. And as I attended Bible college, I was struggling financially, but one of the ways that I used to pay for it was helping the church we were attending set up chairs and the sound equipment and everything. And so there was a column that was in this theater room that we were attending church in. And the row was always awkward, and I'd make sure I'd set up the chairs so that they could see the pulpit. And the one particular by the column, I'd pray over and say, God, just touch this person, whoever sits here, that they're focused, they're not focused in on the column. I always thought it was a distraction. And so I just kind of prayed over the chair, and just as I was setting everything out, ready for Sunday service, and continued with Bible college.
So as I was growing in the Lord, I was really hungry for more and looking for an opportunity or a way to really learn how to do this, how to get to know God more. So I started attending Bible college, and when you registered for Bible college, you had to take some classes. And so I went to my first prerequisite class for Bible college, and Mike ended up being our teacher, and I thought he was really cute. And what should I tell him? That I started chasing you around?
Not quite that. You didn't quite chase me around, but you tried to strike up conversations. And I remember, I think it was June of that year, you hit me up on Facebook, and we started talking via Facebook more than we really did in church. Yeah, and I remember saying that, well, I like where things are going, but if it's going this direction, understand I'm not going to kiss you before we get married. And so our relationship kind of started that direction, and we wanted to do things different. That was one of the key things that both of us really honed in on as we grew with our love for God. We wanted to do things different. We wanted to establish a foundation that was completely different from anything we had known before in any type of relationship. And so we wanted to make sure that we were above reproach no matter what we did.
I think that was really how we both came back. I know for me, how I came back to the Lord was wanting something different. And so I feel like leading up to marriage, that was kind of the theme that we really had, was wanting something different than we had ever had before. And so we did not kiss until the day of our wedding.
Yep.
Yeah. So we got married, and leading up to the marriage, we did everything God's way. We knew that our marriage was from the Lord, and I think we focused so much on our relationship and even our relationship with God together that we didn't focus so much on how we were going to the logistics of being married with children. And we ran into financial trouble instantly from the very beginning of our marriage, which was hard for me because I had seen that in my previous relationship, and it really made me not sure why, if this was blessed and from God, the provision wasn't there. So we kind of faced it till we could make it, or tried to at that point.
I think again it was a lot of both of us doing our own thing. Even though we did the marriage God's way, we were still making financial decisions without Him. Mm-hmm. And whether it was a job or we were still hustling, and we were still trying to make ends meet. without really trusting in God and consulting God. We didn't ask, should we do this? I got involved in a business that I thought was God, right? I dropped out of third year Bible college, went into this business and thought that this had everything written on God, but I never really prayed over it. I thought, well, marketplace ministry, and so we went after this, chased it. It fell apart. The partnership fell apart. Went overseas chasing other things. Almost got stuck in another country right before Christmas of 2016. And so it was just constantly chasing, constantly thinking we were doing things by faith, but we really weren't, because we weren't asking God, what are our next steps? Our faith level was there for who we were as a family, but the financial side of doing it His way, whether it was tithing, giving, whatever, we thought we were doing these little things, but we still weren't asking God what direction, what job.
No matter what we were doing, at the end of the day, we still ended up without a home of our own, and the things we needed to keep our family.
Yeah, my decisions and not consulting God eventually led to us being homeless.
Yeah. I think looking back, in the churches that we were involved in, what we were kind of taught was, to name it and claim it, and to really go after and pray big, and while God is capable of being big, while God is big, stuff isn't really what we should have been praying over. We should have been asking God where He wanted to provide, and I think you can talk to that, really.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back over our journey, and even though it's only been 6.5, almost 7 years, in such a short amount of time, God's really brought us full circle in the way we look at finances, the way that we look at making decisions is based on Him. And yes, God is a big God, but He's also in the little details, and we had skipped those details, and I'm to blame for that, because I'm the head of the house, but I didn't allow us the opportunity to seek after what God wanted. It wasn't chasing those big, huge dreams. It was chasing after being the family that God wanted us, and allowing Him to provide however means necessary, and being in the right place at the right time, and being associated with the right people. I think that we went about this headstrong journey not really understanding how God provides. And I think that's where the difference in our story ended up being is I chased after gold in Africa. I chased after a big rural broadband wireless deal, and we did all this stuff and still ended up, not having a place of our own, having to live in a hotel. We never lived down the street, but we never had a place of our own. We didn't have our privacy, whether it was in somebody's home. We didn't live
on the street, but we lived in, a garage. We lived in, a spare room that didn't have air conditioning. At one point, all 7 of us were sleeping on a floor in one room. Flat air mattresses while I was 9 months pregnant. One of our kids we brought home from the hospital to a hotel room.
Yeah.
So for me that was hard, because that's part of my background is that toxic instability of a home, and so that was hard to go through in this beautiful God-ordained marriage. That was hard for me. I think in spite of all we were doing at church, or all the places we were serving, and the ways we were trying to really show up for God, it was in the moments that we started to figure out why God put us together and gave us this family, and when we started working on our relationship, or our relationship, and what God wanted out of what worked for our family, and not what people said, right? Like the school and what you were supposed to do for work. Really, what did God want to do in those things, and not?
It wasn't the hustle and bustle. It wasn't trying to chase the next big adventure. It was focusing in on the family, and I think that was the turning point in the homelessness. Was, okay, where do we go from here, God? What's next? You brought us together. How do we do this?
I think for me, it wasn't even what's next. What's right now? How do I do this right now? You gave me these kids, this husband.
That's a great point, because we were always looking for what was next instead of the now moment. And when we started just looking at the now moment of, okay, where we are supposed to be right here, right now, focusing in on these kids, this family, and building the foundation, and seeing what God wanted out of that began the transformation to bring us to this point. And even the beginning of this year, we were still, as the pandemic hit, we were still looking at
what's next.
Well, not only what's next, but we were still fighting the possibility of eviction. And if it wasn't for the pandemic and God stopping us and saying, you're
God stopping the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, it was shaking the foundation not only of the church we were involved with, but shaking us and where we were going to go next and what we were going to do. And we knew God brought us to this community, this neighborhood, and going, okay, God, if this is the house you provided, if this is the family you provided, then we trust you to provide for everything. And over a period of time, over this year, I mean, if you would have said, we'd still be here 9 months ago, I think we would have both laughed. But this year has been an interesting one, to where we have truly done a 180 and focused in on who we are, what we are, and what we are as a family for God first. Yeah, for most of my life, it was about the service. It was about doing things for God, always chasing those opportunities of ministry outreach, and how much are you doing on a weekly basis, and setting up chairs and vacuuming and all of this stuff. And it was like we were fitting our lives into church instead of building our life as a church, being the church. Yeah, it's become a lifestyle now to live out this pattern of what Christ wanted us to do. He said that they would know we were his disciples by our love for one another. And as we've grown in our love for all of us in this family, and at times it can be challenging, we're a big family, but we're understanding that the relationship starts here. And our purpose is here, to love God, to love others as Christ has loved us. And so it's a lifestyle transformation that's made the difference in this family. And going forward, we don't have to worry about our purpose in life. We're just looking for assignments, those opportunities of the words that God would give us to give to somebody, whether it's just one word or inviting them to be a part of our family. And I think that's what the early church was, and I think that's what the difference is now. This movement is bringing back from the early church.